This morning our reading is going to begin in Mark chapter 6, beginning in verse 14. Now King Herod heard of him, for his name had become well known, and he said, John the Baptist is risen from the dead, and therefore these powers are at work in him. Others said, it is Elijah. Others said, it is the prophet, or one like the prophets. But when Herod heard, he said, this is John, whom I beheaded. He has been raised from the dead. For Herod himself had sent and laid hold of John and bound him in prison for the sake of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, for he had married her. But John said to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Therefore Herodias held it against him and wanted to kill him, but she could not. For Herod feared John, knowing that he was a just and holy man, and he protected him. And when he heard him, he did many things and heard him gladly. Then an opportune day came when Herod on his birthday gave a feast for the nobles, the high officials, and the chief men of Galilee. And when Herodias' daughter herself came in and danced and pleased Herod and those who sat with him, and the king said to the girl, ask me whatever you want, and I will give it to you. He also swore to her, whatever you ask me, I will give you up to half my kingdom. And so she went out and said to her mother, what shall I ask? And she said, the head of John the Baptist. Immediately she came in with haste to the king and asked, saying, I want you to give me at once the head of John the Baptist on a platter. And the king was exceedingly sorry, yet because of the oaths and because of those who sat with him, he did not want to refuse her. Immediately the king sent an executioner, commanded his head be brought. And he went and beheaded him in prison and brought his head on a platter and gave it to the girl. The girl gave it to her mother. And when the disciples had heard of it, they came and took away his corpse and laid it in a tomb. If you remember in our last reading, Jesus sent out the 12, 6 groups of 2 by 2, to go and preach the news about Jesus. And so more and more people were hearing about the news of Jesus. That it just expedited it. In fact, one of the people that heard about him was Herod Antipas, King Herod himself. And so when people were hearing about Jesus, they were coming to all kinds of conclusion of who it must have been. It must be Elijah, it must be the prophet, or it must be just one of the other prophets. But when Herod hears about it, he thinks, it's got to be John the Baptist, raised from the dead. That's why he's doing these miraculous things. And so you think, well, why? What does that have to do with anything? We get this flashback to find out that it must have to do with a guilty conscience. You know, Herod loved John the Baptist. He respected him. He listened to him. But Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, she hated him because Herod had married her. And John the Baptist preached against it. He said, it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So this is pretty bold for a preacher. And so Herodias hated him so much, I think Herod put him in prison so that he could protect him from Herodias. But all that goes by the wayside when he has this big birthday bash. And so he has the nobles and the high officials and the chief men of the kingdom, and probably had alcohol, and he had live entertainment, none of which is wise or good at all. But Herodias' daughter is one of the live entertainment. She comes in, she dances before them, and that would have been Herod's stepdaughter. It says that she pleased him and the men that was with him. I don't think that was an innocent pleasing. And so Herod offers her anything that she wants, up to half my kingdom. You ask and it's yours. She goes back to her mother and says, what do I need? What should I ask for? Think about everything that she could have asked for. But she immediately goes into the king and asks for what her mother wanted. I want John the Baptist's head on a platter. And Herod hears it, he fears. He doesn't want to do it. But because of peer pressure, he gives in. Think about it. There's adultery, there's sexual immorality and lust, there's probably drunkenness, there's hatred, there's pride, there's this bad rash vow made by Herod. I mean, all of it's terrible. And so why does Mark tell this story? Well, you think about it. A holy and righteous man like John the Baptist loses his life because of all these sins. The same thing that happened to him is going to happen to his cousin, Jesus. And so it's a terrible story, but it's really something for us to kind of give some thought to. And so I hope you can take it with you today.